What a great kickoff to APTA's 44th Annual Legislative Conference. This morning, we'll hear from APTA's President and CEO, Paul Skoutelas, from the Chair of APTA's Legislative Committee, Diana Mendes, and from FTA Acting Administrator, Jane Williams. After all that serious work, we'll be rewarded with laughter, courtesy of the Capitol steps at lunch. When I became Chair of APTA last fall, I outlined a short list of priorities for our association, and they are all relevant to why we're here in Washington this week. First, I said that if APTA was going to redefine our industry's future, we need to have a better strategic plan to get us there. We've been developing a 3-year strategic plan that reflects both our diverse hopes and our shared values. Many of you have helped us to reimagine what public transportation should and must be. And on Saturday, the APTA Board of Directors approved a new purpose statement to guide APTA's future. A second issue I spoke about was the need to continue to advance the vision and value of the new shared mobility landscape. I've said we couldn't wait to be invited to sit at the thought leadership table. But first, we needed to create a space for ourselves, and that's what we've done. More than at any time in our history, public transportation is experimenting, innovating, piloting new ideas, and investing in our people and our systems. In large and small systems, in urban and rural communities, public transportation is implementing new technologies, new demand response services, and new business arrangements never before thought possible. And finally, I raised the issue of speaking with one strong, unified voice. Yes, APTA's membership is large, diverse, and can be sometimes rather boisterous. But that's a good thing. It's one of our strengths. The goal is to make our size and complexity of issues and interests a true competitive advantage, especially here in Washington. So the work I described last fall in Nashville is the same work we must do here this week in the nation's capital, to explain our industry's future and its essential benefits, just as we are doing with our strategic plan, to talk about the new shared mobility and how public transit systems are making it a reality in communities every day, and to deliver clear messages that benefit our entire industry. One of the promises I made when I became APTA Chair was that I would serve you by showcasing your efforts. There are 2 people here this morning who are doing the work I described, and I'd like to ask them to say a few words. First is a member of APTA's Executive Committee, Adelie Marie Legrand, Vice President of Transit Planning and Chief Strategy Officer of the Regional Transit Authority in New Orleans.
Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to have this opportunity this morning to address you. In New Orleans, we just completed a strategic mobility plan where we're focused on the next 20 years of providing mobility services that our community, through our process, asked us to provide for them. We have over 100 action items that we need to implement. A lot of them are capital projects, some are operational improvements. But we recognize that this work that we're trying to continue to accomplish for our community cannot be done without the advocacy and support of APTA. We need help identifying sustainable funding sources to get us from today through the next 20 years. We also need help to change legislation so it's more responsive to what we need to do today to meet the needs of our citizens in New Orleans. So we want to here today thank APTA and all of you for helping us, as well as your properties, try to move forward in this new mobility era. Thank you.
Thank you, Adelie. And now let's hear from Buddy Coleman, Chief Customer Officer for Clever Devices. Buddy?
Thank you, David. Good morning. I love following Adelie. She's got great passion. I hope I can keep it up as well. Many of you know my company, Clever Devices. We're an ITS solutions provider. We've been in the industry for over 32 years. We help transit agencies work smarter, safer, and more efficiently to ensure that riders' experience is the best that it can be. Clever Devices has been blessed over the years with great success and growth. Our business is really built on people. Technology is about the people who put it together, the people that implement it. Talent, or our people, our human capital, is the most important asset of Clever Devices. It's the biggest capital investment we make. Over the last 5 years, we've been growing at a rate of about 30 to 40% a year, which is tremendous. We're also 100% bought into the transit industry. We service buses and trains. Therefore, we work arm in arm with our transit agency partners. The positions that we hire for are not ones that can be hired for quickly. There are not a number of people waiting in line. We need to hire people who are highly skilled and highly educated. So it's not something that we can turn on and off. It requires a long-term investment in finding, recruiting, and training and retaining those people that can create these solutions. It's why predictable, recurring, stable funding is essential, not just for the public transit agencies, but also for the businesses that serve them. We can't make these decisions, we can't make these investments unless we're sure we're going to be able to keep the people that we hire. Today, we have nearly 600 employees with facilities in New York, California, Illinois, North Carolina, Texas, Virginia, and Washington State. And all these people are working to make transit a better industry. We've spent millions of dollars in research and development over the last 5 years. And we've only been able to do that really because of the FAST Act. We saw that there was going to be stable funding moving forward, so we decided to make the investment in both facilities and people. And it's a multi-year authorization of the FAST Act that allow us to make these investments confidently. Over the last 5 years, we've created a brand new product that brings all our solutions together for the betterment of the ride of the public transit. And basically what this does, it's called disruption management. Disruption management brings the CAT AVL system where there's a problem, perhaps a water main break or a fire that causes disruption in service along the route, gives the dispatcher an opportunity to make a change to the route. It selects it for them, gives them an opportunity to accept it. Once they accept it, it pushes that information down to the driver. The driver now knows there's a problem, gives them turn-by-turn directions on how to reroute the system. The riders on the bus are notified by either a PSA or they could be notified by their smartphone. The riders that are on the street are also notified by their smartphone. And they also are notified by any screens that may be available. At the same time, we're putting that information down to the street supervisors so they can jump in as well. It may sound like an easy effort, but we had to coordinate many systems to be able to do this. It's taken thousands of hours and millions of dollars, and the only way we can do it is by the stability of public financing. We need to stand here arm in arm with our transit partners and go to the Hill and tell them, look, funding is not just a public service. Funding puts dollars into the private sector at a multiple of 4 to 1, as you saw, and it really creates high value, high long-term jobs for our industry. So I've been to the last 9 legislative meetings, I've been to fly-ins, and I'm here again to stand arm in arm with our transit authority properties and go to the Hill and request that long-term stable funding so that companies like Clever Devices and other companies that support transit can continue to do the work we do. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Our industry has more powerful stories to share. That's one of the reasons why we're here in Washington this week. Let me share my story with you. The agency that I represent, the Capital District Transportation Authority in Albany, New York, will be the first property in upstate New York to add electric buses to our fleet. We're starting a pilot program this summer with 4 New Flyer electric buses, but that's just the beginning. The CDTA plans to invest $42 million in what's called the River Corridor BRT. Our goal is to have that BRT line up and running with a complete fleet of electric buses. This may seem like a modest project compared with some larger systems, but it's big for the people in Albany, Menands, Watervliet, and Troy. It's a vital part of enhancing the capital region. Like many of the investments, improvements, and expansions going on at your systems, this is a story that needs to be told here in Washington and celebrated in our own communities. And that's why APTA has created a new initiative nationwide. It's called Get On Board Day. And its purpose is to generate awareness of and increasing support for public transit among riders, non-riders, elected officials, and stakeholders. So on April 25th, we want you to showcase the value and benefits of public transportation. This is during the congressional spring break when your elected officials will be back home. APTA has developed an online toolkit to help you promote and celebrate that day. Just look on our website. This is an opportunity for you to get on board with this awareness and education campaign and to tell your story in your community. So circle the date April 25th, visit the toolkit, and make Get On Board Day a great success in your community. If you need more incentive, right outside those back doors, you can sign our pledge board and get your official Get On Board t-shirt. It's a local initiative with national benefits. And now please welcome APTA's President and CEO, Paul Skoutelas.
Dave has become a master at that. He is up and down without any effort, it seems. David, thank you. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for the introduction. And good morning, everyone. Great to see you here. I love these lights, right? Very patriotic. Gets us in the mood, being here in Washington. Well, it is great to be here. Welcome all to APTA's 44th Annual Legislative Conference. There is no place better to be than Washington, D.C. We're awaiting cherry blossom season, but importantly, it is always the right time to be here in Washington to make sure that our voices, our needs, our opportunities to deliver good quality transportation services across the United States and North America are heard and acted upon. So thank you all for being here and for engaging. For many of you I know, there's a standing room crowd here. I'm very pleased to see that. You've already put in 2 full days of work, right? We had all kinds of committee meetings over the weekend. I don't think anyone was busier than our acting administrator, Jane Williams. I know she was busy over the last couple of days as well, so this is not her first appearance here. And I must say, in all of my decades, I'll leave it at that in the industry, I don't think that I can recall a more engaged and active administrator for the FTA than Jane Williams. So Jane, we thank you for that. Thank you for participating. Thank you for engaging our members. I know they appreciate it very, very much. I hear it every day. So we began the 2019, the year, in a not so auspicious way. We thought we were going to hit the ground running January 1st. And of course, we found ourselves, all of us did in the industry and beyond that, in a federal government shutdown. And immediately we began to think, what's that impact going to be on our members? How are they going to react to that? Are they going to have the funds necessary to carry out their activities? And within a couple of weeks of the shutdown, APTA responded with a survey to all of our transit agency members, individual calls that went out to many of you to understand it and really ask the question, what are you doing? How is this impacting you? And we got responses back that indicated just within the first 2 or 3 weeks of the shutdown, over 36% of our members said they're already experiencing difficulties, and it was difficulty of cash flow, right? Makes sense. Grants weren't being approved or acted upon, and so agencies were concerned, are we going to have the dollars necessary to pay the bills, quite frankly? And in many cases, having to take money from other accounts into their operating accounts to pay expenses. A number of you who indicated that you had difficulty anticipating bus deliveries, and would you have the federal dollars there in order to make those payments? So the concerns began to rise. Well, lo and behold, we were very thankful when around the 15th there was this budget agreement with the President and the Congress, and that was lifted. And what was most impressive, and I think really speaks again to the level of commitment and dedication that we have in the FTA, was the amazing response through the leadership of Jane and her staff in an incredible accomplishment within the space of a week, pushing out nearly $1 billion worth of grants and grant approvals. That is astounding. Jane, we thank you for that. Would you please, with your team, please stand for just a quick moment so we can say thank you? I don't know how you did it, but you did it. And Bob, thank you for that. And that's real leadership, real commitment. I'm sure working all kinds of hours through weekends to get it done. And our industry does appreciate it. And I've heard many, many comments over the last month or so just echoing that. So thank you. Thank you for all of it. So here we are together in Washington. We have a big job ahead of us. It's an exciting time. People are talking infrastructure. Again, I cannot recall a time when everyone is talking infrastructure in some form, whether it's Congress, whether it's the President, whether it's the administration in general. Everyone is talking infrastructure. All the associations are talking it. As I've gone around from meeting to meeting, we tend to follow each other around. I follow ASHTO, ASHTO follows us, et cetera. Everybody is talking about the same because I think we've reached a point in our development here that we all understand the importance of making very significant investments in transportation. And certainly public transportation is a very critical component of that. It's an amazing time when you have the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that steps forward and says, look, we propose and support a 5-cent per gallon increase in the gasoline tax for 5 years, 25 cents. Well, you think, well, that's the business community recognizing that, but it doesn't stop there. The National Association of Manufacturers have signed on to that. The American Trucking Association have signed on to that. All of the other associations that we work with, our partners, have signed on to that. We're not saying that is the purest, the best answer necessarily. There could be other forms of revenue that should be looked at, and we're very open to that. But very clearly, our partners and APTA believe that that would be the most efficient, the best way to step forward in quick fashion and address the issues of the Highway Trust Fund, which expires towards the end of 2020, to address its solvency and to put more money into transportation infrastructure investment. So we're supporting that. We're committed to it. If somebody has a better idea, we're open to it, right? We want cash. We need cash to invest in our public transportation, in our infrastructure. So a lot ahead of us in terms of these daunting deadlines. We're already halfway through fiscal 19, so we're already beginning to talk about fiscal 20. The Highway Trust Fund, as I mentioned, is only 1.5 years away from its expiration. We really don't have a lot of time. But it's amazing, though, that our team, our leadership, many of you participating in our committees, participating as part of our APTA legislative committee, have already been doing that work. It's been going on for a good 1.5 years. And what am I speaking of? I'm speaking of developing the principles that will guide our direction for what it is we're seeking with authorization, with the new FAST Act, and with additional investment in public transportation. For our part at APTA as well, at the staff level, we've been busy on your behalf. We have delivered a package of information to every congressperson, every senator, every House member, every delegate. They've gotten a letter from me explaining the benefits of public transportation. They've gotten very detailed information that's state by state or congressional district by congressional district that talks about the businesses that are in those districts. So it's one thing to see the active transit agency. That's critically important because that's delivering services directly to people. But also sometimes invisible are those facilities, those plants, those economic and job generators that are in communities and congressional districts all over the country that contribute to our economy. That's what we've been up to. That package of information is gone. There have been literally weekly meetings on the Hill with us and, again, our congressional representatives talking about infrastructure, talking about the possibility of an infrastructure bill, what that might mean, and certainly talking about authorization. And again, we're doing this hand in hand with our coalition partners. Just last week, Mike Terry, President and CEO of the Indianapolis Public Transportation Corporation, known as Indigo, was in Washington, as he is here again today with us, but he represented APTA on the Hill, kicking off the first of the hearings on the FAST Act reauthorization. Mike, you did a superb job, and we thank you for that effort. It's all part of a plan to make sure that the voice is there from agencies large and small about the importance of more investment in public transportation. So we've been talking to our congressional leadership on both sides of the aisle, because this needs to be a bipartisan approach. The administration is going to be key to this, obviously, and we are certainly seeking the leadership of the President and the administration in this regard. So we are prepared to do whatever's necessary, to spend whatever number of time, effort, to make sure that we are collaborating together, offering ideas, sharing ideas. We want the best solutions for public transportation. They're along several dimensions. Certainly, we're seeking a solution that says more money in state of good repair. Our nation's public transit infrastructure is deteriorating. US DOT itself, in its report from 2015, identified some $90 billion of backlog. I'm sure that number today is hovering around $100 billion conservatively. So we need state of good repair money for our systems, and that includes bus and rail fleet replacements. We need capital investment grants so that communities that want to grow and are growing can provide that growth through BRT systems, through light rail, through commuter rail, whatever the mode might be that makes sense, including some of the newer technologies that are out in the marketplace today that we are cooperating and working with. So we need a multifaceted package, and there should be some amount of money that we can say this is more of the mobility sum, much like what FTA has today, their mobility on demand grants, but in a much more robust fashion, so that communities can take that extra risk. The agencies can be really more bold about some of the experimentation that's going on. You know firsthand, and I know from traveling around, there's a lot of experimentation going on in the industry today. People are not sitting still saying, this is what I provide, bus service, BRT, and rail. If that suits you, great. That's not what's happening today. And we need to make sure that message is out there. Agency upon agency is testing new technology partnerships, new solutions, whether they're first mile, last mile, new ways to deliver paratransit. Autonomous vehicles are in the testing mode in a number of cities all around the country. We got to make sure that message gets out there. We don't want Congress to think that somehow we're stuck in yesterday, delivering what we did yesterday and thinking that's the only solution. It will continue to be, in my estimation, the core of what we deliver. It will be the backbone of a multimodal transit network, but it will be augmented with a lot more options than we have seen over the last number of years. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great time to be in our industry, but we need continued federal support at the highest levels. Federal government has been a great partner with state and local governments for public transportation for well over 4 decades. We want to continue that. And the local communities are stepping up. What have we seen in terms of ballot measures all around the country? They're stepping up. People are taxing themselves, saying, yes, we need to take the initiative. We understand the federal government can't carry all the load. We're going to put up our own tax dollars to do it locally, but the federal partner is so key in that. It creates an environment and an atmosphere to say, invest, we're here as your partner. We will help you make those investments that you need. We have identified just in the last couple of weeks doing a survey, and we did a survey of our members. We didn't get an exhaustive response back, but we got a very good deal of response, and we found that there are over $230 billion of identifiable projects across the country for transit agencies that fall into one of those 3 buckets that I mentioned: state of good repair, capital investment grants, new extensions, and other modernization needs that don't quite fit into those categories: intermodal facility, a bus garage replacement, a fleet replacement. Those are the 3 categories in terms of new investment that's been identified already by us through our membership just in the last couple of weeks. It's not 100% of the population of projects, but it's a good measure. And it says that it's at least $230 billion that is there waiting to be addressed through new investment. So we got to tell our story, and that's where each of you come in. Public agency members, transit authorities, board members, business members, you have a message that is undeniable. You can speak firsthand better than anyone can, certainly better than APTA as a staff can, about what's happening in your local community, what you're delivering, what the impacts are to your customers, what the impacts are to your economy locally. We are here to message that with you as well. and to draw the national perspective on it. But there's no substitute for what you can do, and that's what we're asking here. You're here this week, go out, make your visits, pay a visit to the administration, pay a visit to FTA, pay a visit on the Hill. Make sure that you're telling your story. It's a compelling story, and no one knows that story better than you do. It rings true. It's compelling, and we need to take full advantage of that. So we got a big job to do. We're up to it. Look at this room. It's full of people who are dedicated to this industry, believe in it, work in it, deliver great service to our communities. That's something we should be very proud of. You should be very proud of. So now it's my great pleasure to welcome the chair of our APTA's legislative committees. I mentioned a moment ago, we have not been sitting still over these many, many months. Diana Mendes, Leanne Redden, who have chaired our legislative committee efforts, have been tireless. And just a little story. When I came on board about 14 months ago, they both said to me, you know, we think we need to get an immediate start on reauthorization. And there was a little bit, I won't say pushback, there was maybe some doubt, right? There was some doubt, well, you know, we got a long way to go before reauthorization. It's too early. Let's kind of like, we'll get there. But they did not take that as an answer, and we, in fact, started immediately last year, right after the first of the year. And they've been convening meeting after meeting, call after call, getting input, understanding the needs, getting a dialogue that I believe is leading us to a really sound set of proposals. And we witnessed those yesterday in the meeting. So with that, let me welcome Diana Mendes.
Good morning, everyone. Such an honor to be here with you today, and it's been a real honor to be working with you since we kicked off our authorization efforts. The people in this room have worked tirelessly to advocate for public transportation, and it's because of you that we can advance the future of our industry. So thank you for everything you do. We've spent months hashing out different ideas, exchanging different perspectives, all with the goal of speaking with one very loud voice together to advance the interests of public transportation. As Paul said, there's about 18 months left before the FAST Act expires, and we still have a lot of work to do. So it's really heartening to see so many people here this morning who are so committed to be part of APTA's advocacy efforts. Thank you for that. We need your help, so stay engaged, keep it coming, so that we can advance the future of our industry. So this morning, we have with us an official who's going to play a very important role in the FAST Act's reauthorization, as well as in funding decisions for public transportation programs, projects, and grants. FTA's acting administrator, Jane Williams, has had a strong and productive relationship with APTA, and we are very grateful for that. I think she's participated in as many meetings and sessions as any of our members. So thank you, Jane, for being so generous with your time and helping us navigate for the future. We're so grateful for your commitment. So Jane leads an agency of more than 500 employees that provides over $13 billion annually to the public transportation sector. Prior to her appointment, she was director of the Washington Area Transit Office of the Maryland Department of Transportation. So she knows the industry from the ground up, and that makes all the difference. Having managed a system that serves more than 1 million passengers every day, she knows firsthand how important federal partnership and federal funding is in helping state and local governments meet the mobility needs of their citizens. Much of her career has been devoted to public service. She held positions at the Department of Energy, Labor, and Interior in earlier administrations. We're very much looking forward to hearing her thoughts about the administration's proposed budget for fiscal year 2020 and the outlook for public transportation. Before we invite Acting Administrator Williams to the stage, let's just begin with a look at some of FTA's highlights and accomplishments. so very impressive. Thank you, Acting Administrator Williams, for your vision and your leadership, and for being here today.
Good morning. Thank you, Diana. Before I begin, I want to thank Paul and David for your leadership and for your collaboration. You know, our ability to collaborate couldn't be more important. In fact, it's critical as we broach discussions about reauthorization and the future of transit. And I'm very glad to have the opportunity to speak with you today about those priorities and the priorities at FTA. I hope you enjoyed our visual summary of some of FTA's important work over the last several months. As you can see, we've been very busy at FTA doing our part to support public transportation nationwide, and we have a phenomenal in-house staff that produced all of that work. So a round of applause for our communications team. As you can see, I had the chance to visit many of you, and yes, every time I go somewhere, I ride many of your transit systems. I even do it when I'm traveling with my children. It drives them crazy. We were in Europe. I made them figure out the Rome transit system. It took a little bit of time, but we were able to navigate it. But I do like to ride your systems firsthand and really understand how people get around across America in different communities, because it's different. You know, people say when you've seen a transit system, you've seen one transit system, and it's true. And I like our partnership. You all are incredible hosts, so thank you for that. We are very happy to be back at work at FTA. You know, we had the lapse in appropriations. We had 90% of our workforce not with us. And Matt Welbus and I were very lonely at FTA. And so we were very happy to be back. And it's been challenging for us, but even more so for the agencies like you that depend on us. So getting funding, as Paul mentioned, to our grant recipients was our #1 priority. And I'm happy to report, as Paul mentioned, that we were able to process more than 4,300 requests in the first week, as he mentioned, for $1 billion in funding. And that funding ranged from small planning grants to small operating grants for tribal lands to large CIG grants. And so we've been working really hard to make sure that, God forbid, if there is another shutdown, that we can work around that. And so we've worked very hard with the Department of Justice and with OMB, because those funds are already appropriated. It's just the people that administer the payments that are not considered accepted and able to work. And so we hope to have something more official for you in the coming weeks, but we're hopeful that we're able to avoid having that, but very grateful to my team and my CFO for what they were able to turn out. Just to give you an idea, they typically process 50 payments in a day. On day one, they processed over 1,400. I mean, that's the difference. And that's just one example of what FTA staff brings to the table every day to support our mission to improve public transportation in America's communities. And so I thank my FTA team. Many of them are here today, and they're led by the most capable executive director at DOT, Matt Welbus. Stand up, Matt. You know, Matt and I had a little bit of a rough start. Many of you may not remember, although Paul mentioned, I came out of MDOT, and so did Diana. But Matt was the one who withheld my funds. So when I went around for my courtesy visits with my leadership, they said, oh, you have the best executive director. He's really a good guy, really knows his stuff, has been great to work with. He was managing FTA for the better part of 8 or 9 months before my arrival. And I said, I don't know. Jury's out on that Mr. Welbus, because he withheld those funds, you know, from Maryland while I was there, and I wasn't real supportive of that. So glad to say that we like to call Minnesota and Matt is a very good balance to my energetic type A, kind of run very, 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 very fast, that he's a good balance to that. And we're very lucky to have him at FTA. As you know, we've put up $15 billion into the industry this year, and that's a big deal. That's in formula and competitive grant programs. We also awarded, separate and apart from that, $194 million in PTC grants, and $1.6 billion was flexed from the Federal Highway Administration to FTA's program, and that's an increase of 23% over just 2017. Last year, we were able to get our full year 2019 apportionment table published. It's on our website, so you all will be able to know what your grant amounts are. We hope to have that published in the Federal Register soon. It was for $10.2 billion in funds, and they're apportioned by $5.3 billion in urban area formula grants, $2.9 billion in state of good repair, which, as Paul mentioned, is a huge need, $716 million in rural area formula grants, $280 million for enhanced mobilities of seniors and individuals with disabilities, and $615 million in buses and bus formula grants. With the release of the tables, you can draft your grants and submit the applications through FTA's TRAM system. I also wanted to mention that we have $17 billion from previous years that's available and resulting in significant balances that are already ready to be awarded in grants. So I wanted to make sure that you all know that those monies are sitting there. And there's also an additional $17 billion that are waiting to be drawn down. When you total that, there's about $50 billion of transit funds at FTA that you can access. And so what I would tell you, thank you. What I would tell you, my message would be, do not wait. Get your grants in. Put those funds to use in the public transportation projects that are so critical for your communities. And if there's ways that we can be helpful to get that done, let us know how to get it done faster for you. As you know, Paul talked about this year's 2020 budget that the President just released. This administration requests $12.4 billion to bring our nation's bus and our rail transit infrastructure into a state of good repair, fund new and expanded transit systems, and strengthen our transit safety oversight. The President requests make strategic investments in transit infrastructure through formula and competitive funding opportunities that address the capital needs of the communities throughout the country. Of the total budget request for public transportation, $10.2 billion will go to transit formula grants, consistent with the fifth-year funding of the FAST Act authorized level. But I want to highlight that the budget request for the first time also includes $1 billion in new funding for transit. That's significant because that funding is $500 million in capital investment grant funding and $500 million in bus and bus facilities, competitive funding, and formula funding on rail transit, state of good repair needs. So just last year, this was a plus-up. So the $500 million for state of good repair and buses is out of the general fund, and it's above the FAST Act authorized level. So, and the $500 million in CIG last year and the year before was a zero. So this is progress. It's not perfection, but it is progress. And I think recognizing that is important, that we, have put those investments out there in that budget as a way to say we recognize there's needs in transit. And so we're happy with that. Now I went off script. I went a little rogue there, but probably going to be in trouble with my staff later. And I would encourage you, people say that we're slow, that we don't process grants fast enough. Everybody wants us to be defined by CIG instead of the other three letters that we're known by, which is FTA. I would tell you that we are processing grants at the same pace as previous administrations in their first 2 years. 17 grant applications, 13 of which have come into grant agreements that represent totally the $4.8 billion in investments, 3.3 in grant agreements. And when you compare that to the previous administration, there was only 10 projects and $1 billion in investments. So we, I know, are doing things slightly different, and change is never easy. It gets rough sometimes, but I have to tell you that our commitment and bringing these projects to fruition is solid. And so I'm happy that we're able to look at the CIG line and see a $500 million plus up there for projects that may become ready in 2020. As part of the budget, the President also requested $37 million for FTA's research program to advance transit innovation. And this is, like Paul suggested, it's such an interesting time to be a part of this industry. We are focusing our research activities on testing new technologies to increase safety and support improvements in infrastructure and finding new ways to increase mobility. You know, one of Nat Ford and Paul's time, you know, when Nat was here as the chair, was to not think about mode, but think about mobility. And I think that has really taken hold in the industry. And, you know, we need to get people to where they want to go in the most efficient way possible. And I think, you know, these new technologies that are coming on board are going to really help us move in that direction even more so. So overall, the budget, you know, that the President put forward is really building a 21st century infrastructure system. And everyone in this room knows that smart investment in transit infrastructure that supports mobility stimulates the economic growth in every community, and it makes it a better place to live. So this administration's budget request confirms the President's belief that infrastructure investment leads to economic development and a better quality of life. Moving on to safety, you know, that's Secretary Chow's #1 priority. And since my arrival at FTA in August of 17, one of my very first priorities was to establish a partnership with the states in establishing all 31 state safety oversight programs and certifying those programs prior to the April 15th deadline. Today, I'm very pleased to announce that FTA has certified the final SSO, the 31st SSO, the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission. You know, this is particularly meaningful to me, as I alluded to with Matt withholding my funds, but I was serving at DOT. Sorry, Matt. I was serving at DOT under Secretary Ron and Governor Hogan, and, you know, was responsible for helping bring over the finish line the actual Maryland legislation. I was told by Kevin Reichert, who had said to me it was finished when it really wasn't finished, to help bring that over the finish line. And it was quite difficult to get Virginia, Maryland, and DC all agreed to the exact same legislation. Was no easy feat. And so this is a very special day for us. And so the certification of the commission will transfer the direct safety oversight of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, Metro Rail, from FTA to the Safety Commission. And with that certification, I don't get to write the check, but approximately $48.5 million in FTA funding withheld from DC, Maryland, and Virginia will now be available to all of those jurisdictions across many transit agencies. So we're very excited. Having all the states' certification is a tremendous accomplishment, and when I began my tenure, there was not one certified program. I asked for all of your help, and you all delivered. And I especially want to thank all of the state officials that really stepped up to the plate and partnered with FTA to make this happen. And of course, I'd be remiss to not thank my own FTA leadership, the Executive Director, Matt Welbus, and our FTA Safety Officer, Henrika Buchanan. Henrika, you have to stand up and take a bow. Her leadership has been absolutely instrumental in reaching this milestone. And so our shared commitment to improving the safety of our nation's rail transit systems has been a driving force to establish stronger SSO programs across the nation. FTA is also launching a human trafficking awareness and public safety program, including the announcement of 2 funding opportunities totaling $4 million, which will be published in the coming weeks. The funding which FTA is making available to address human trafficking, crime prevention, and transit operator assault supports Secretary Chow's initiative to combat human trafficking on all modes of transportation. USDOT and FTA are committed to detecting, deterring, and eliminating human trafficking on all modes of transportation. We hope that these resources can help you with projects and public awareness campaigns that will address those critical public safety concerns. In addition to safety, another of Secretary Chow's priorities is, of course, investing in our infrastructure. And as we spoke about on our video, the BUILD program provides significant funding for road, rail, transit, and port infrastructure projects nationwide. There was an increased interest in funding levels to the BUILD program this year. We had close to double the amount of applications, although I have to tell you, our applications were down in transit. Last December, Secretary Chow was able to announce $1.5 billion in BUILD awards, which represents a large down payment on the department's commitment to fixing America's infrastructure. Last year, transit projects received more than $160 million in funding for 14 projects across the country. In fact, Secretary Chow traveled to Florida in February to announce a $25 million BUILD grant in Jacksonville, Florida, with JTA Nat Ford. And that supports improvements to a downtown corridor, including an autonomous transit network powered by smart technologies that will help reinvigorate the city's Riverside area. Another example from the BUILD grants is a $15 million grant to transform SEPTA's 30th Street Station, doubling capacity and improving accessibility. I had the opportunity to tour the project, which is notable for its significant value capture elements, with Jeff, the CEO, just a week or two ago. And the grant is one part of a jointly funded project that includes federal, state, local, and private sector support. The $38 million project will leverage $23 million in state and local funds, including $2 million in private investment, that will yield $3.8 billion in economic development and create 40,000 jobs. The project is just a part of a private development that will transform Philadelphia's Schuylkill Riverfront waterfront area. Thank you, Jeff, for hosting me. It was great to see the project up close and on first-hand basis. And these are the types of projects and partnerships we're pleased to support through the BUILD program. As I mentioned earlier, FTA continues to support projects through the Capital Investment Grant Program. And as you know, I signed a few at the end of last year. In November, I signed a $149 million full funding grant agreement with Orange County Transportation Authority for the Santa Ana Streetcar Project. And in December, I signed a $1.17 billion FFGA with Sound Transit for the Linwood Link light rail project. You know, Linwood Link will expand light rail service between Seattle and some of its most northern suburbs, is also receiving credit assistance through the USDOT's TIFIA loan program. And of course, I also was able to travel to Florida and announce a $17 million CIG grant at JTA for its East Corridor BRT line in December. And this is their 4th out of 5 BRT lines, which serve several transit-reliant populations. And I was able to go down and support Jacksonville's First Coast Flyer, and it leveraged both funding from Florida DOT, JTA's own funding, and it was a true model of partnership that we have with JTA and with Florida DOT, and reflects the administration's commitment to our shared responsibility. As important as these BUILD and CIG grants are to the communities, I would argue that it's equally important to also balance our state of good repair needs. USDOT, as Paul alluded to, has estimated our backlog to be $90 billion. And I don't need to tell all of you that that number continues to grow. And the President budget requests significant funding for support of state of good repair needs, with various programs totaling $4 billion. The additional $500 million I spoke about earlier is for state of good repair needs. $250 million for rail transit needs, and $250 million for bus and bus facilities needs. And this comes from the general fund. So these additional funding measures compete across government for funding. And so we are very happy that we are able to put that $500 million that can be used for state of good repair needs. We know it's a critical challenge that you face in the industry. And I would tell you that we are happy to support you and to continue to offer our technical assistance to help agencies meet the new transit asset management requirements that went into effect in October. And we've been doing webinars and in-person training. And I would tell you, we will partner with you just like we did on SSOA, just like we are doing on PTAS. We will continue to do that. And speaking of resources, I'm happy to announce that we issued our notice of funding for the low and no emissions grant program. I understand it's in the Federal Register today. It's $85 million in available resources for low and no emissions. And so we're looking forward to getting your applications on that. That's 19 money. And so please get your applications in. Later this spring, we'll be able to announce additional funding opportunities, including our bus and bus facilities infrastructure program, which will be funded at $423 million, and our tribal transit at $5 million. Many of you may already know that our passenger ferry $30 million NOFO is already out on the street, and applications are due by April 15th. So we have lots of requests for funding out to you. And last year, we had our transit-oriented development grant application process, and I have to tell you, it's the only grant program that we have is undersubscribed. And so if you have needs that are planning needs around transit-oriented development, be looking for a notice of funding opportunity later this spring for planning grants around that. So don't forget to look into that, because it's really a program that has a lot of funding still left in it. And lastly, I'd remind you that DOT has a NOFO out for our test automated driving systems. And that includes funding for testing of transit systems as well. And that deadline is actually this week, so don't delay. Together, these competitive grant programs are $600 million to improve safety and reliability and to enhance mobility for transit riders across the entire country. I know that many of you are concerned about, as we go through your triennial reviews, we've gotten a little bit later start with the shutdown, but I promise you that we will continue to partner with you and work with you to make sure that we stay on track. We're working hard to improve efficiency and transparency, and we will continue to do that. If you have ideas for us, we'd be happy to hear them. And in closing, I would just like to say that we are focused on improving transportation in America's communities, and that we remain committed to be your partner as you continue to deliver safe, reliable public transportation in your own communities. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing the rest of you that I didn't meet with yesterday or the day before, today and tomorrow.
Jane, thank you so much. You have unwavering commitment from the industry, from APTA, to work closely with you and your team, the administration, and with the President's leadership and the administration's leadership with Congress to forge a transformational investment in public transportation. That's what we seek, and we're hopeful and eager to work with you at every turn. Thank you so much.